Seekers, welcome to our winter series, Infusion of Joy. My name is Deb McGregor. Thanks for being here. I am thrilled to welcome to today's show, Emily Enger of Good Enough Marketing. Emily, welcome.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me on your show, Deb.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this because we are going to talk about one of my favorite conversations. Well, actually two, writing and marketing. And I'm not claiming to be a pro at anything of those, but I actually met you because of writing and needing a good copy editor. So, oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. So let's start with, first of all, how did you even realize that A, you could write, but B, even beyond that, you had copy editing skills and marketing skills related to this? I know that's a big mouthful, but my gosh, we have to start somewhere, right?
Well, my story with writing starts as a kid because I was just an avid reader, right? I was that nerd that always had to have a book and would go and find a corner bleacher at school and read instead of play with the other kids. So that was me, and I just loved books, and so I knew that I wanted to write them someday. I just wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and so I started asking adults, how do you become a writer, right? And everyone's like, well, usually you get a degree in English. So that's what I did. I went to school and I got an English degree. But being a Midwestern farm kid, I also have a really practical side. And I also realized that, one of the jokes about an English degree is everyone's like, well, what are you going to do after school, right? It's like a degree that it's in the humanities. So everyone's like, you can't get a job with an arts degree. So I started looking for ways to kind of pad my learning experience. One of that was getting a certificate in publishing while I was there and working for a press. And then I took some marketing classes because I recognized through my certificate in publishing that the publishing industry was changing. And so I was going to have to be not just a writer, but also understand how to market myself as a writer. But that was in college, and I really didn't think afterwards that I would specifically start a marketing business. I just thought that was going to be for me. And after school, I ended up as an editor for some trade magazines. And I thought of that as an editor job, right? I thought of that as people send you stories and you fix them and correct the grammar and put a title on it and publish it. And instead, especially because I was at a trade magazine, it ended up being a role that had a lot of marketing in it. I would be one of the people going to trade shows and kind of, hobnobbing with both readers, but also with advertisers. And suddenly I realized that this role in editing also had some marketing in it. And from there, I started my own marketing column for the paper, and I started studying marketing as it related to the industry I was working in, which was agriculture. And that's kind of how I started falling in love with just communications in general. It's really common for people who have degrees in English to either go into journalism or communications. Those are two pretty common paths. So my journey is not unique in that way. But then after that was when I was at the magazine, I was living in upstate New York. My husband and I moved back to Minnesota. And then I got involved in the arts, which was my kind of true passion, because I was the girl who wanted to be a writer. So I wanted to talk to creative people. Right. And so then I became the communications director at Watermark Art Center in Bemidji. And then I had kind of a fully what we would call a communications role, which is more a traditional marketing kind of view. But writers were always my people. And so when I quit that to stay home with my kids, and I needed some sort of other income stream and some kind of freelance gig like so many of us do these days, yep. I ended up doing some book marketing for some local authors that I had already built relationships with through my communications work, and started doing book marketing.
Wow. My gosh, this is such a mouthful. I mean, there's I'm picturing okay, first you're in New York and then you're back here and then you're doing this and then I love it. And what I really love is that all of this has prepared you and brought you to who you are now and what you're doing now, because it all serves. All of this stuff serves. And that experience and especially that broad spectrum of experience is what makes you good at what you're doing, because you don't just have a little bit of these knowledges, but every client, every project you learn, right? Like we just
Oh
work
yeah, because
so
every
hard.
author is different. Every book so far, I have yet to have clients who are in the same genre. Like every time I take on a new author, they're writing a completely different thing, and so I have to start over, kind of looking up different media that would specifically want, their book, and do the research all over again. But that's kind of what marketing is. So you kind of know that going in.
Absolutely. So I'm curious about, because you were doing this copy editing, you done some work for this trade magazine, and all of a sudden you really started realizing that you had this very specific niche audience and starting to work with authors, starting to work on helping them get their books out. How did that come to fruition? Because I don't feel like this is just one day I wake up and, the magic pill came alive and here I am.
Mhm.
But for you, you actually had something that started leading you that direction.
And someone who you actually know and have talked to on your show many times. Wendell Affield, who is
Yes.
an author here in Bemidji, and I had done some work with him through the Watermark Art Center because he had launched a book at our venue, so we knew each other. And he is actually the one who told me, he's like, you would be good at this if you ever decided to take it on. And at first I was like, oh, maybe I'm busy. I was pregnant at the time and I had another toddler and I didn't, I knew I wanted to do something, but I wasn't sure what. And so then I kind of dipped my toes and I'm like, well, I'll do a little bit. I'll do like a few hours a week. And Wendell was my first client, specifically an author. That was specifically an author client, I should say. But I still kind of was really slow at kind of claiming it and kind of going in all the way. But eventually, honestly, it's just time, because slowly, like, word gets out, oh, Emily's helping this author, and then another person reaches out to me, and a lot of people I said no to at the beginning just because I didn't, like, I still want to write my own books someday, right? I still need my own time for my own creative fulfillment, and I have kids, and trying to do that balance was hard. But then over time, it's just kind of grown, and kind of you just wake up one day and you look around and you're like, wait a minute, I have a full business now. How did this happen? So yeah, so it was this kind of slow process, one by one, that kind of made it happen.
Well, it's fascinating because at some point, and I don't even remember, it's funny how, like, I tried to look back, like, when did I actually meet you? Like, and what I was thinking about, because you do the editing for all of my blogs that I do on a weekly basis. And at some point, I think I just reached out and said, I need an editor. Can you edit these blogs? And then as you and I have been working, I mean, we've been doing that now, I think 18 months I've been doing that. It's been a while that I've been doing these blogs. And it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, have I been really doing them that long? Things, maybe I got a book in me, and it's so interesting because as you and I have done that work together, every once in a while you'll be like, oh, another author, oh, this is coming in, or people will say, do you know somebody who can do this? And of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, Emily, this is what she does, and she does it well. And one of the things that fascinates me about this whole thing is that it's sort of like with this project, you have the start, you have the middle, you have that, but it never really does end, right? Because writers are always writing and they always have to market it out. So I was curious about the process of working with authors. Like, what does that look like for you?
It's different with every author because every author has a different need. Some people come to me and they're like, I don't even know the definition of marketing. I just have this book and I like it and I don't know what to do with it now. Some people come to me and they're actually pretty good at marketing, but maybe they're good at more traditional marketing versus digital marketing, or there's some specific segment that they do well and others that they struggle with. And some people come to me for stuff that's not even traditionally marketing. It just is in the process of creating a book. Like for you, like I edit for you. I don't market your stuff, but my role is more of an editorial one. I've also had authors who they wanted to self-publish, but they didn't know how to format their book. And so I just do like kind of the boring stuff on the back end for them so that they can get their book finalized. And so it's really, really different with every single person. When I recently kind of rebranded, as you mentioned, my company is called Good Enough Book Marketing, and that piece, it's a newsletter and it's a Facebook group where I try to teach authors how to do it themselves. And so that is now I'm kind of doing this whole new kind of process, because this is now more educational. Instead of hiring me to fully build your website, I've also done that for authors. I am teaching you, all the pieces that you need, and also the pieces you don't really need, and just kind of being a guiding voice and maybe even accountability partner for authors. So that's different again. So which is
Yeah,
what I
let's
like.
talk.
I like
Yeah,
the types
let's
of jobs where you don't know when
right.
you get up in the morning what the day's going to hold.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to talk about this for a moment, because one of the things you said is what you need to worry about and what you don't need to worry about. Because one of the things I think that happens in these spaces is it gets so cluttered. It's the same in the work that I do. It's like people will sit there and tell, oh, I need to do this. It's like, no, I don't need to do all that. And so you sort of cut through the noise and the clutter, and you say to people, this is what you need to worry about in your Facebook groups, in any kind of group conversations that you're having. So talk to us. I mean, like, what is your number one tip that when you say to people, man, if I had to give you one really good tip, this is what it would be, because you and I both know there's a lot of noise out there.
It would be do what you love. Everybody thinks that they need to kind of reinvent the wheel, or that they need to be everywhere, or they get overwhelmed because the part of the job that they have to spend the most time on is their least favorite, right? And that's just true of all of us, because what we're least good at takes us the longest. So you end up spending less time on the part that you like. And so I try to explain to people that marketing doesn't have to mean that you have to try everything. That the path that you like. So if you really love Facebook, but you hate TikTok, just do Facebook. If you hate social media altogether, but you love doing book events and reading that bookstore, like, find the part that just makes you come alive and just do more of that before you worry about all the stuff you're not doing that everybody else is doing that you think you're supposed to be. Marketing, I actually just did a post on this in my Facebook group. But people think that marketing is about experimenting with new paths, and actually basic marketing is about figuring out what has already worked for you and repeating that. So you'll repeat the same ad campaign if you have one that you got a great return on your money for, right? You just keep running that ad, don't stop, instead of finding another ad in another place. Like, just do the one that works and then lean into it. That would be that's what will cut through the burnout. The reason people are burnt out and think that they have to do it all, like, you won't feel burnt out if you do the part that you like.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite things is, find what you do well, really hone in on that. And if you need to hire somebody for some of the other stuff, then do that. But I love what you're saying, because it's sort of like we're giving ourselves full on permission to completely play our bigger game and what it is that we do. And no one else is doing what we do. And that's what I love about what you're doing with authors, or with training people to be their own best advocate, is be the best you, play your bigger game, and stop worrying about everybody else. That is, number one, it's so distracting, but number two, it's such an energy waster for us, right? It's a huge energy waster.
And as a creative person myself, and as a writer, like, this is the advice that always frustrated me, right? It's like, once upon a time, like, all my hero authors got to just write, right? They got to just, like, go in a secluded cabin somewhere and just write and just cut away from the noise and disconnect from society and write beautiful poetry or essays or whatever. And we can't do that anymore. And it's frustrating. And I would hear so much advice about what you should do these days as a modern author. And it was just overwhelming. And it's like, well, when are you supposed to write? Like, if you're doing all of these things and you're wearing 20 hats, which we all are, this is not just for authors. Every job out there has now multiplied into 3 at least jobs. But then you can't do the part that really matters. And especially for authors, unlike other jobs, you're creating content, and there's nothing to market if you're not creating the content.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so even other book marketers that I follow, they're marketers first, and more than they understand the artistic piece. And I started as a writer myself, and so I try to give better advice. Like, I still agree with this concept that you should do art for art's sake, right? That you should write something that you're passionate about, not something that has sellability. But I think there's still a way to sell that, right? And so it's just the same conversation, but from a perspective that is more manageable for a writer.
Yeah. And when we are doing what we love, the passion shines through anyway. It is going to attract the right people because it's who we are. It's who we are at the core. And I cannot tell you how many times I've wrestled with that in my own head, where I'll sit down and say, okay, this is what I want to write about. And I think, oh, but can that sell? Can that this? Can that? And I finally was like,
how many clicks will that get?
It's like, okay, put it aside, just start writing. And as you know, some of my blogs, I know that my better blogs are when I just sit down and write about what's going on right now or what's happening. And those are usually the ones where you write back and like, how did you read my mind? Or how did
it's like, this
because if it's happening for me, it's happening for somebody else, right? It's just so true. It's just so true.
Right.
Talk to us. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You're not supposed to think about the audience when you're an artist. And yet marketing teaches that you have to think about the audience. And so all of us, because social media has made all of us amateur marketers, that we're all marketers for ourselves and our own personal brand on our personal pages, right? And so now we're thinking too much about the audience. And so it's like we need a shift again, back to not caring so much about the end of the pipeline.
Yeah. If this is reminding me actually of the Brain Audit, the book, The Brain Audit. And one of the things he talks in there about is when you find that person who loves what you do and just embraces your work, interview them. Because what you're doing is you're already bringing out your best self and your best work to the world. Now let's find out who that, the person that's purchasing, because then you can get that concept of, oh, these are the people that probably are going to benefit the most from this, right? So but I love that perspective that you're bringing into this. Let's talk a little bit about this Facebook group, because there's probably going to be people, in fact, I believe that there are people watching right now that are like, I want into this Facebook group. Talk to us about it. How do people get into it, and what can they expect when they are a part of it?
Okay, so it's a paid group. It's a whole $3 a month. And so the way you get in is you go to my website, emilyenger.com, and there'll be a button on the homepage that you can see that'll guide you how to sign up for the subscription. And once you sign up, you'll get a link to the Facebook group, and you go in from there. And in that group, I just give you as much advice as I can. So there are things like templates where I'll have pre-written like a fake pitch to an agent or a fake pitch to the media, a press release about a book launch that you have full permission to download and then tweak, obviously, to make it your own. So that instead of like writing from scratch all this marketing work that just takes forever, like I've already done the first draft for you guys. You can just go in, grab the handout that is whatever stage you are in, and make it your own and send it off. And something that would have taken half a day now takes you maybe 10 minutes.
Wow.
So that's one of the biggest pieces that I was excited to offer people, because I realized how long some of these processes were. I was like, we just need to cut the time down for people. The other thing I do is I just talk about marketing basics, and I'll have posts explaining marketing concepts, because most people didn't attend school and go get a communications degree. So right. I do some of that. And then I've also, I'll interview other experts. So recently I had actually my husband on. I had a little in there who is a former journalist. He spent 10 years in the media. And so I did a little interview with him, kind of like you're doing with me now. And I just, asked him questions about what it's like to get a press release about a book, and what would make a journalist say yes or no to writing a story on an author and stuff like that. So you can kind of get that other perspective and understand how to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, so basically there's ongoing content that's coming in there. So it's not like, oh, they're one and it's done.
No, it's like several times a week I'm making some post that has to do with how to advocate for yourself. And it's for self-published authors. It's for traditionally published authors. I have some people in there who are not published yet. They're working on that first book, but that's a great time actually to start thinking about how you're going to talk about the book. A lot of people think it's too soon. I don't. I think that there's definitely going to be stuff in there for you too. And so it's just, and then there'll be little reminders and little advice pieces like, this is how frequently you should post on social media. But again, because my spiel, my whole concept is good enough. What's good enough? Let's not beat ourselves up for this. You know,
Yes.
instead of posting every day, I'll give advice on, okay, what's the minimum you can post while still getting a good return in the algorithm? You know, stuff like that, that is kind of nerd speak that nobody really knows, but I just kind of break it down for you and be like, here's the base minimum you can do, and it's still good enough, you guys. It's still okay. Do this and then go right.
I love this concept of good enough because I did a lot of work with Rick Tamlin, who does the Produce You group. And one of the things that he would talk about is often you go before you know. Good enough. It's if we get caught in that perfectionist thinking, nothing happens. And so there's this concept, okay, good enough out the door, good enough out the door.
There
And,
was,
right?
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. So
There
you
was
get excited.
there was something that I saw. I don't remember which channel online. It was a marketing channel. I follow a lot of marketing channels, and they had this post that really just like struck me. And they said and it wasn't about books in general. It was about product launches. And they said if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, however many years ago, then you published or then you launched too late.
I love that.
There it was, which was just really encouraged me, because even as a marketer with my own business, it's like, okay, when am I ready to start like taking people in the group, right? And it's like I have to wait till I've got all these things done. And like it's okay to be embarrassed by your beginning, because you have to just get started.
Yes, good enough, and that's why I love the title of it. And I think about even stuff for me. Like I look at some, like I do these videos every day, right? I look at some of them because sometimes I haven't even had a shower. You pull my hair back, or whatever, and yet I made an intentional decision that I was going to do that because this is the real, this is the authentic, this is the raw. And if we cannot connect with people on that level, right, the bottom line is, and I know you know this, every author does not write a perfect page every time. You and I mean, I'm just even having a hard time visualizing you in a ton of makeup and hair done in this foo-foo dress and high heels. And I mean, maybe on the red carpet day or something, but I'm not the same way. I'm not the person that, you know, does the nails and the foo-foo makeup and all the stuff, unless it's a, you know, whatever. I mean, I guess maybe the day I got married or something. I don't know. But the point I'm making is that if I all of a sudden start doing videos that I look, it's like, that's not who I am. And that's not who people are going to be hiring. And it's a disconnect. And so what I love about what you're talking about is we want to connect here. We need to connect with you and who you are and what you're doing, right? And that's good enough.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Really? Well, that perfectionism. And look, I am a recovering perfectionist, right? Like in other ways, not I definitely am like the wear jeans farm kid, but you know, especially even as a writer, it's like, do I dare put my words out? They're not done. There's another sentence I could tweak. You know, I do have that perfectionist mindset that I even have to talk myself kind of down from. And that's why with writers, there's this kind of understood thing that this what's called the sophomore book is the hardest one to write. So you've written your first book. The world knows you for a certain thing, but because it was your first book, you could take as long as you wanted to write it, right? And you maybe took 10 years to write that first book while you were doing a different job. But now you have to write a second book, and people expect it within the next couple of years. So you're rushed, and you're having this huge weight over you because you have this first book that you got 10 years to spend on, and you don't have that anymore. And the number of authors who just crumble under the weight of the second book because of that perfectionism and that expectation. And they won't let themselves just put out a mediocre book. And I don't mean to say you should always do your best,
right?
But you should not, you shouldn't be comparing it to, you know, whatever that first one was that got all the time in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so true. Okay, we need to let people know how to be able to get in touch with you. We know that you've got this Facebook group that we're talking about, this Good Enough book marketing group. What other ways can people experience you, get in touch with you, just learn more about you, or even set up a call? There might be somebody watching that's like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about writing a book. I need to get in touch with her. How do they do that?
So if you go to my website, which is just emilyenger.com, super easy, there's a contact page, and that's just like emailing me. So you can just email me through my website. I also have a public Instagram page. It's Emily Enger Writes. And they can also find me on Facebook here as well. So.
Okay, good. I'm typing this in the chat. Emily Inger writes. Let me see if I can get all that.
That's on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Instagram. Okay, there I got emilyinger.com for your website. Whoops. Okay, that's something kind of went weird. Just a minute. I got to get your Insta on there better because I am sure that. Okay, now it's taking it. I had a little internet glitch. See, it wasn't good enough for the moment. Of course that had to happen, right?
Of course.
If somebody contacts you, tell us a little bit about what that conversation looks like with you in terms of maybe somebody that you would want to work with. Let's just talk that, because I think sometimes people, it's like I always talk about this, when people go to therapy for the first time, the hardest step is getting into the parking lot and then walking in the door, right? Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, like when people think about the book and contacting somebody like you, it's the hardest thing sometimes is picking up the phone or getting online and setting up a time to talk. Once they're talking to you, they're fine.
Right.
Let's talk about what can they expect from that, because that might help reduce stress around this a little bit.
Oh, that's a great question. First of all, I'm really easy to talk to. I'm really
yes, you are.
It's not an intimidating conversation at all. It's like a casual conversation. Almost, envision us over coffee, even though it's probably on the phone. No, so what happens is I say, hi, tell me about your book and tell me what overwhelms you. And then you can tell me anything. You can tell me, literally anything. I've heard it before, I promise. And then I basically give you some direction and say, hey, I think this would help with that. Or maybe my Facebook group would help with that. Or maybe my Facebook group would not help with that. And actually what you need is, you need a cover designer, and let me send you a list of people I know who can help you with that, or stuff like that. But mostly it's just tell me about your writing and tell me about where you want to be in the next few years and what your dream is for your writing. Why did you write this book? What goals do you have for the book, and are you meeting those goals? And how can I help you meet those goals?
Yeah, I love this. And so we want to encourage people, if you've been watching this and maybe you've got that book idea that's been ruminating, might be a devotional. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of different types of book. We're using the term book, but it can look like a lot of different things. Reach out to Emily, get in touch, start following her on Instagram, check out her website. I know for me, one of the things I really like to do before I ultimately work with someone, I check them out a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. I look at some of the works that they've done. I look at some of their projects and I think, okay, yeah, I can see this being a good match for me, and then reach out for that conversation, because it's just a conversation. It's a starting point to say, hey, is this a good thing?
And there's no commitment fee, like, to talk to me. Like, I don't expect that just because you talk to me means you're going to work with me. By any stretch of the imagination. I love books. I also know it's hard to make a living as a writer. There's not a lot of money to go around to pay somebody else to do stuff. That's why I made a Facebook group to teach you to do it yourself for $3 a month. It's really low key. And if you go and you kind of look through my own Facebook or my Instagram, you will just see a big nerd who posts a bunch of, quotes from, Victorian era literature. Like, it's not going to be anything that intimidates you, I promise.
Yeah, I love reading your Instagram. When you put those up, I'm like, oh, this takes me back to 8th grade English with Mrs. Biscup, I mean, I love it. I am like so all in. I love this. Well, Emily, I've got the cough that we've been talking about. I want to thank you so much for coming in to talk to us today on the Infusion of Joy. I'm just so thrilled for you. And I think you really have found a great place and really are meeting a great need for people. And it's something you're passionate about, exactly like what we talked about. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Deb. I really appreciate coming on and talking with you. So.
Yeah, thank you. And just reminding you, get in touch with Emily, emilyinger.com, or Emily Inger Writes. You can find her on Instagram as well. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, today for today's winter series, Infusion of Joy. And reminder, next week, we've got Amy and Peter Minke with Minke Wellness. It's going to be an amazing program. They do some incredible wellness techniques. They are trained in things that just like literally less than 50 people in the United States are trained in. They have people that fly in all over to work with them, and you're going to learn more about that and the work they're doing in the world. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We want to remind you to live joy and share joy. And thanks again, Emily.
Bye.